Everyone, if we will now call the Budget Committee to order. Madam Secretary, we can have roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Vice Chairman Abshire?
Here.
Mr. Barris?
Here.
Mr. Barty?
Here.
Mr. Brame?
Here.
Mr. Landry? President Stelly?
Here.
And Chairman Andrupon?
Here.
You do have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Item number 1 is to receive request for grant funding. 1A is Ward 3, $570,000.
Second.
Waterworks. Number 12 of Ward 3 for costs associated with the Waterline Extension Project in unincorporated areas along with Big Lake Road and Nelson Road. We have a motion by Mr. Brame and a second by Mr. Stelly. Any discussion? Any objections? That motion carries. Item 1B, Ward 4, District 14, $56,320. Waterworks District Number 4 of Ward 4 for costs associated with water well pump upgrades and water
So
line
moved. Second.
relocation on Davis Road. We've got a motion by Mr. Abshire and a second by Mr. Barty. Any discussion? Any objections? That motion carries. Item 1C, Ward 5, $115,000, Ward 5 of fire
on
protection
1C.
of District 1 for
Second.
costs associated with purchase for a brush buggy with ancillary equipment and a truck. We have a motion by Mr. Barty and a second by Mr. Stelly. Any discussion? Any objections? That motion carries. Item 1D, Ward 6, $40,500, Ward 6 Fire Protection District Number 1 for costs associated with the purchase of firefighting gear.
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Abshire.
Second.
And a second by Mr. Brame. Any discussion on that item? Any objections? That motion carries. Item 1E,
Move on 1E.
Ward 8, $10,590, Waterworks District Number 8 of Wards 3 and 8 for costs associated with the water line relocation on Packing House Road. Got a motion by Mr. Stelly and a second by Mr. Barty. Any discussion? Any objections? That motion carries. Item 1F, Economic Development, $500,000, McNeese State University.
Move on 1F.
For costs
Second.
associated with the construction of McNeese Liquefied Natural Gas, LNG, Center of Excellence Project. We do have a motion by Mr. Brame and a second by Mr. Barty. We do have a guest speaker. Yes, Mr. Beam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we have a couple of folks from McNeese here tonight, and we asked them to give a short presentation. First, let me introduce, this is actually Jason French. He is the Executive Director of the LNG Center of Excellence. And Dr. Wade Roos is also here, Vice President for University Advancement at McNeese. Just a reminder for the committee, we spoke earlier this year with all of you. This item has been budgeted and y'all are familiar with it, but McNeese had asked until now to take action on it because they've actually been putting a lot together and made great progress. And Mr. French will go through a few slides and certainly answer any questions you may have.
Brian didn't tell me it was supposed to be a short presentation.
But if you can state your name and address for the record, please.
Jason French, 148 Napoleon Street, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70802. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and jurors. It's been a few years since I've had the opportunity to address this group. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight on a very exciting project. When I've been here before this group before, it has been on behalf of one of the LNG companies that's been building in this area. As you all know the story of the LNG industry well. You have $34.5 billion of facilities that have already been built and are operating in this region, tens of billions of dollars more planned. As I said to a reporter the other day, that $34.5 billion, we sometimes in this industry, those numbers get so big, our eyes glaze over. You may have seen in the paper, I equated it to Superdomes. If we were building the Superdome here in Southwest Louisiana, it's the equivalent of building 37 Superdomes, already having those on the ground in Southwest Louisiana. So the investment that's happened here has been significant. Not only have we had capital investment in the area, but you have seen corporate neighbors, good corporate neighbors emerge, I think in Cheniere, Cameron LNG, Venture Global, Tellurian, others to come down the pike. You're going to see that. This project, however, that I'm here to talk with you about this afternoon, I'm really excited about because I think it represents an important second chapter for both the industry and this community in growing together. You've had those capital investments, you've had the good corporate neighbors emerge, But what this project is going to do is establish a way for this community and this region to benefit from the LNG industry beyond what's happening within the fence. For Southwest Louisiana to become a thought leader in the LNG industry. As I've told Dr. Bickel and Dr. Roos, there's absolutely no reason that if the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times are writing a story on American LNG that they shouldn't come through McNeese State University in the future. And that's the goal for where we want this thing to be in 18 to 24 months. So I want to introduce you to something that as I said, I think is going to be an important and really transformative piece for this community and its relationship to the LNG industry. Got to kind of talk about two quick things. I am going to be brief, Brian, but I want to talk about the building and then the center within the building. This project started as a result of a $2.8 million grant from the U.S. Department of Commerce. Was that in 2020 when you received that grant? I came on board in January of this year to work as executive director for the project, but it came about as a $2.8 million grant and was largely initially focused on training and workforce development opportunities. So training for students at McNeese who would like to work in an LNG plant, and then workforce development opportunities for those who are already working in the LNG plants to further their careers through a McNeese facility. The project in recent months has grown exponentially in its ambition and what it intends to be for this community. The building itself is now a 30,000 square foot complex on the campus at McNeese State. I'm going to show you some renderings of that. You can see it lightly in the background of this slide. And I'll show you the orientation of where it will be on campus. The center within the building has three key objectives. One, that education, career training, and workforce development. Dr. Bickel talks about it as a three-legged stool. That first leg is the education, career training, and workforce development piece that we always intended to be a part of the center with that original $2.8 million grant. The second piece, and I think this is incredibly important for both the industry, for McNeese, and for the other universities who are going to be part of this process, is research. Industry-funded, academic-funded, federally funded research that will involve McNeese State and a number of other institutions in Louisiana and across the Gulf Coast, and I'll share a little bit more with you in a moment about that. But also being a repository of best practices for the industry. And being recognized by the federal government for being the repository for best practices for the industry. And then finally, and Dr. Bickel certainly emphasizes this one when he talks about the project, it really is establishing Southwest Louisiana in particular, but all of Louisiana as a premier thought leader in LNG, with that basis being here in Lake Charles at McNeese State. Finally, and I touched on this on that research and repository piece, we are now working with University of Louisiana at Lafayette, LSU, and a number of other institutions across the Gulf Coast for what I really call the center within the center. The center, the physical center, is going to be a building that's based here in Lake Charles. Within that center, we're going to have a virtual center that's going to touch 7 universities where we collaborate on research and bring additional resources to the table, working alongside industry for the goals that I outlined. I can answer more questions about this, but I am trying to respect the brief instruction. This just gives you an idea of the orientation of where the site will be. You can see on the right, that is Ryan Street headed south, or headed north, I guess. Sale Street, if you know where the former JD Bank is now going to be the Student Health Center, right at the corner of West Sale and Ryan Street. Then you have the new Jeff Davis Bank. Our facility will be right between those two buildings on about 5 acres that the university already has. This just shows a layout of some of the facilities that we're going to have in the building. Some of this is changing as we go. We're working with our architects for designing, but what you'll see, classroom and conference space. The LNG Americas Conference has now come to Lake Charles twice. We would plan for this center to be involved with future iterations of potentially that conference or other industry conferences being brought to the Lake Charles area. We also intend to use that conference space as individual classrooms for students, be it from the School of Engineering, Science and Mathematics, or from the School of Business, where we also have an LNG curriculum taking hold in the fall. On the first floor, you'll see office space, a simulation lab. I don't think I have up in that top right-hand corner on the left side, you see a simulation lab. We're working with industry to determine exactly the technology that's going to go in the various parts of this facility, but the simulation lab is designed to be virtual reality, to bring in both college students, high school students, and those who work in the facilities to be able to go through a facility using virtual reality technology. You'll see in the upper right-hand corner a control room. Outside the facility, we intend for there to be a hot unit so that students can be trained on actually touching a pipe with LNG and doing those type of things with an operating control room just inside the building. On the second floor, you see a lot of office space. We believe there is, well, we actually know that there's substantial demand for office space in the area related to the LNG industry. We have even heard from some of the federal regulators who are interested in what we're doing at this facility that they may have interest in locating their offices here regionally in the LNG Center of Excellence at McNeese. One thing that has been added, going to that thought leadership piece, and that's not actually in this design, I need to get it updated, is a small television studio. LNG, obviously with what's happening in Ukraine, but with this community knows that LNG has been a big story for quite some time. It seems that the rest of America and the world are waking up to that the LNG from Southwest Louisiana is a big story. There's a heavy demand for content related to LNG. So I've asked that we can put in a small television studio so that we can start doing programming, hopefully with the mass communications department at McNeese, incorporating those students into producing some podcast content and video content that we can put out related to the industry when we have CEOs and regulators present at the center. And this is not a $2.8 million building. As I mentioned, that initial grant. As our ambitions have grown, so have our budget. The commitment that we hope that the parish is making to this project is going to be incredibly important to getting it done. What you see is a project now in excess of $12 million. I'm happy to report that we are about 75% there on fundraising. We hope to, Dr. Burkell keeps telling us that we need to start construction by the end of the year, so that's what we're working towards. As someone with a history in the LNG industry, I've stopped saying it will be January 2024 when it opens. I know to give more general timelines. So I'm saying first or second quarter of 2024 will be operational at this site. That's what we intend to be. And this is just a couple more of the vantage points. This would be from Ryan Street, behind Canes, the gap between Canes and what is going to be the Student Health Center. This would be the viewpoint from Ryan Street. And then this is the back parking lot. So we've got, I think, 181 parking spaces. This will be the back point where most folks will come into the facility. So that was as brief. I told you it would be a brief PowerPoint presentation, so I think I covered that. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I know we have several drawers.
Okay.
Mr. Brame.
Jason, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, very nice complex. I'm excited about it. So when I went to the rendering on the first one that you showed, is the only entrance and exit off of Sail Road, or is it off of anything?
No,
off
so
of
the entrance that most folks are going to use is going to be here on the back. Oh, you mean the entrance to the parking lot?
Yes.
So that is.
Because I would make a suggestion, if it's
Yes,
Sail
it is.
Road, have the city see if they can help improve that intersection, because you can't turn left or right there.
Okay.
I'm just.
Good feedback.
It's just a suggestion. It's too close to the corner of Ryan and Sail.
Good feedback.
It's just something I thought
Yeah.
about when I saw it. Because if is that the only entrance and exit from there?
Yes, that as currently designed, that is the only entrance.
Well, I would try to maybe meet with the city and see if they can improve that.
Okay.
Because it's gonna be a nightmare. I don't know how much traffic's gonna be going in and out on a daily basis, you know?
No, it's a very good point.
I think so, but anyway.
I just,
That's why I brought
that's
it
what.
up. It's a nightmare there, I know.
Yeah.
Anything else? You still
No,
have
I'm
the
done,
floor.
I'm done, thank you, sir.
Mr. Abshire.
How many students will fit in the lab? Do you plan for enrollment? I mean, how big?
So when we get asked specific questions like that, I'm not going to dodge that. But what I will tell you is it's evolving. We're working with industry to identify curriculum opportunities, what the curriculum that the companies who are based here saying that they need for operators. We also are looking at opportunities as we talk about growing this. Obviously, McNeese is still a relatively small university, but we want to find opportunities for students in other curriculums. So if you want to be something beyond, if you want to do something other than be an operator in the fence, I've always said, if you're an accountant and you want to work in the industry, this global industry that's in your backyard, we should be able to help design a path. One of the things that's happening, the business school has adopted an LNG certificate program, certificate in LNG from the business program. It's 6 courses that they're going to begin launching this fall, ahead of the center actually being. I don't know what the enrollment numbers for that are yet. It will ultimately be a part of this center, and I would imagine that classes would be held in the center once it's up and operational. So I don't actually know how many we're going to reach yet, but we're being very ambitious. And we can't necessarily, given the limitations, offer a curriculum for pre-law or communications in LNG. But what we can do, we're looking at some pretty intense mentorship programs working with the companies. So if you're someone like me who comes from a communications, political science background, but knows you want to work in this global industry in your backyard, we've got a path to set some meaningful relationships, get you into that business curriculum, and create a path for you to go potentially work for one of these companies from the other disciplines as well.
Well, the only other thing I would ask is help Raising Cane's get traffic off of Ryan Street.
We're working
That's
on
not
that.
gonna
As
happen.
part of the student health center, we're knocking down the drive-through, and they'll have 2 more lanes coming off of Ryan Street to get some of that traffic off of.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Ruth.
We're working on that as well.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You're most welcome. Anyone else? I do. The chair has a question unless, you mentioned 75% complete of funding. Can you share with this committee where your funding source is coming from?
So not all of our donors are ready for those public announcements to be
Okay.
made. I can tell you it is a combination of private foundation funding, corporate funding that is ongoing, and we're very much a big part of my job these days is working on that. But private foundations, other public entities in the area, and corporations that are involved in the industry. So we think it will be, what we're hoping to do is relatively soon, in the next couple of months, have an announcement of the primary funders for the project, those who want to come out and announce that.
Very
So,
good. Okay, thank you. Good presentation. We
Thank
do
you.
have a motion and a second before us. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, any objections? That motion carries. Item 1G,
Move on 1G.
Economic Development, $25,000, Louisiana High School Rodeo Association for costs associated with the 2022 State High School and Junior High School Rodeo. We have a motion by Mr. Stelly and a second by Mr. Barty. Any discussion? Any objections? That motion carries. Item 1H, Economic Development.
Move on 1H.
$10,000 Louisiana High School Athletic Association for costs associated with the Louisiana High School Athletic Association's Boys Basketball Championship. Motion by Mr. Abshire and a second by Mr. Brame. Any discussion? Any objection? That motion carries. Item 2 is to recommend that the police jury adopt a resolution amending the fiscal year 2022 budget for those funds that deviate from the estimated
adopt.
budgeted revenues, expenditures, and/or fund balances. Motion by Mr. Brame and a second by Mr. Stelly. Any discussion on item 2? Any objections? That motion carries. Is there any other business that needs to come before this committee?
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion?
Second.
Any objection? We stand adjourned.